All right, everyone. I'm excited to talk about fasting and athlete and carbs and ketones and all this stuff with Dr. Dawn Clum on my show. Thanks for coming on to talk shop with me today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. Great topic, needed topic, hot topic.
Yeah, so we were just chatting before I hit record that I just think there's this missing niche here that we need to address: fasting, insulin resistance, and carb nutritional ketosis for the athlete, especially the endurance athlete, because we're all exercising once, maybe more than that a day. So we're active people. We're usually type A, triple A. So you get guidelines saying 50 carbs a day, 20 grams a day. People will do it no matter what. 24-hour fasting. And I think everyone's so type A driven, ambitious that they don't really listen to those red flags that their body might say, stop, you need to eat, and when to do it. So I kind of started talking about the intuitive fueling, intuitive training for the athlete. So let's kind of dive into what your passion is on into this insulin resistance and fasting world.
Yeah, I kind of thank you for that. It's interesting path. I did not choose fasting to be my focus or to be the core of my programs in the way it is now. I actually ran into health problems myself. I was working in Costa Rica. I was the peak performance doctor for their Olympic teams and the Central American, Caribbean, Pan American teams, and we did a lot with the athletes there. And it was going great. I was healthy. I was younger, and things were going on. And I got diagnosed with skin cancer. And it was an accident thing. Not that the diagnosis was accident, because it was on my back, and my medical doctor that worked for me saw it at a pool party, and so I had no clue. And then I was stubborn, and thought everything was good. This shouldn't be happening to me, right? Because I do everything right, and that caused a lot of turmoil. But that's when I started to dig into it, and I didn't get it biopsied. I didn't go the medical route, and basically 6 months later, it had gotten pretty nasty. It grew and fell off is when it happened. It happened 2 years later at the same time. But when I did is I just started to buckle down on the basics that I already knew. And I really got strict with my diet, with my exercise, with my stress relief. I had to take some time off, not time off work, but cut hours back and things like that. And then that kind of moved me into fasting on accident, because I'm gonna try everything. I went vegetarian. Next thing I know, I was doing fruitarian, just kind of going on how I feel. And then I went to water fasting, and that's when things really took off. And I know that now looking back, and at the time I didn't really realize what I was playing with. And then over the years, we started to incorporate it a little bit more. And it wasn't until I got to the population health company when we designed these programs for big corporations with thousands of people going through our studies, that I had to really know my stuff, because I was going before these big medical boards, and they were tough. They were strict at PhDs, MDs, nurses, trainers, you name it. And so when I dove into it really deep, I started to see the cellular mechanisms of what's going on. And that's when it really lit me up. I'm like, wow, this is not just, in my mind at the time, hokey pokey fasting, type of stuff. This is a physiological process is going on, and it's creating a fundamental change in the physiology. It's not a relief thing. It's not a temporary thing. It can actually change how your body responds to your environment, especially with food. And that's what launched the whole thing for me.
That's great. I think, every practitioner has a story like that, a journey that led them down this path. Myself, I was doing Ironmans, and I was doing fasted workouts and doing low carb, drinking the bulletproof coffee, 10, what year is it? 2000, I think it was like almost 15 years ago. I was doing all the right things that people talk about now 15 years ago. But as I was saying, the type A, triple A workout athlete personality, I was doing it too much. And it led me down my path to adrenal exhaustion. I was, running my own business, fitness studio with $7,000 a month rent. Overhead was crazy. And it's just accumulation of stressors. But I think doing too much fasting for an athlete and a female athlete was what happened to me, and exercising too much, like everything too much, and accumulated and led to this metabolic chaos that happened to me years ago, but led me down this path to really say, okay, we might be doing all this right information we get out there, but what if it's too much? And so it's like someone that didn't do anything, but then there's someone that's doing it all and creating problems too, finding that Goldilocks effect for everything, the right amount that's so individual.
Well, that's a wonderful story and a great perspective to have, because we as people, I guess, we like to see when something gets our attention or works, we grab it and we isolate it and we want to do it. But nothing works or lives in isolation like that. And so by doing that, we affect other things. I do the same thing when I was competing and training. Imbalance syndromes, because I just wanted to do what I wanted to do and not what I should be doing.
Mm.
And a couple times I've been woken up by the staff at a gym because I had passed out because I'm playing around with different protocols, getting in the sauna, jumping out, cold showers, doing funky stuff. And next thing I know, I got a 17-year-old kid that doesn't fit in his Gold's Gym hat going, "Are you okay, sir? We got the paramedics going." I'm like, "Whoa, what?" Just, and so we can go to extremes.
Yeah.
I get it. But if we can take a step back and put everything into a bigger context, then we have a real chance at getting the most out of these things and not throwing everything off because we're doing the one good thing, right?
Yeah, and I will say too, I mean, I had my adrenal exhaustion, HPA axis dysfunction starting in 2013. I was, as I said, doing low carb eating, fasted workouts. We didn't know what ketosis, nutritional ketosis or keto adapted was back then, but I was, starting to have all these different problems because you don't listen to those red flags. And I was insulin resistant because of the stress. Every stress response is a blood sugar response. So it's great kind of dive into what insulin resistance is and how you could be low carb, but still have insulin resistance because of stressors, external and internal stressors.
Yeah. Well, we do the same thing that we're talking about with our exercise and habits in the medical profession. We'll get something that works, and then we oversimplify and apply it to everything that it shouldn't be applied to, and then we make things worse.
Yeah.
It happens with diabetes, the whole diabetes story. It's so, when we discovered insulin and we saw kids that were going to die, wasting away terribly, suddenly come back to life, that was a huge thing. Talk about an impact in the world. Great.
Mm-hmm.
But then we took that model and we started to apply it to everything. And when type 2 came around, because it was very rare back then, and when it finally, we were like, "Oh, it's okay, we got insulin," and then we went down that route and we applied the wrong story to that problem. And so we got to avoid that. So insulin resistance is a spectrum of dysfunction. And in a natural state, it's a normal adaptive thing that in the body, like metabolic syndrome, prediabetes, whatever you want to classify in as a little bit more advanced insulin resistance, it's normal and it's natural and it's healthy. Almost every animal a lot of animals and creatures have that mechanism in their body. For example, that's what bears use when they put on weight before they hibernate. So they survive the hibernation. Birds that migrate long distances, they go through, but they develop metabolic syndrome right before they go, and that's what gets them through. And then, so there's fish that there's one season a year where they don't eat for whatever reason, the waters and stuff. But it's really interesting. And what they do is they develop metabolic syndrome and insulin resistance, and then that gets them through the season. And so the difference with us is we have that mechanism too, but we don't hibernate. We don't stop eating for a season, and we don't go long distances and do what we need to do to balance it out. It's a survival mechanism. So we basically abuse that flexibility that we're born with to the point where it breaks us down. And so what happens is there's different reasons this happens, but the continual overexposure to insulin creates the problem. Okay. You can have susceptibility for genetics and for epigenetics in your environment. You can have other things like toxicity, and a lot of things can be involved, but it's that overexposure over time that breaks the system down. Because when insulin is on, we're in what's called the fed state, right? We're in the fed state, and we need to have a balance in the fed and the repair state. They work together, and if we're constantly in that fed state, we're breaking down. Because contrary to what people think, you break down stuff in your body when you eat, not when you fast. Because when you're eating, it goes in your stomach, breaking it down. So the whole body switches over to breakdown mode. You'll break down more protein in your muscle while you eat in the fed state than you do when you're fasting and not eating. That's another misconception that comes along. Yeah. And so you're in that mode. And if you never turn that off, you're in a constant breakdown mode, inflammatory mode, sympathetic mode, and you don't get into the repair mode. because they work opposite. You can't have both turned on at the same time anymore. You can have a light that's both on and off, right? And so we get stuck in that, and over time we don't balance it out, and that just wears on the system and things break down. We get the fat where it's not supposed to be, like in the muscle, like in the liver, and in the organs and the viscera. That's dangerous fat. We might not see it on a scale or in the mirror, but if it's there, you're sick, right? There's more people with metabolic syndrome at normal weight than there are morbidly obese. That confuses people. And when people are very overweight, it's easy to kind of say, oh, well, you probably have this. We don't always know that. And the reality is, if someone's 100 pounds overweight, all they have to lose is 1 gram of fat and they go back to normal metabolically. Wow. Not 50 pounds, not the 100 pounds. So we have to change that thinking. It's kind of what we're talking about, is taking one concept and oversimplifying it and then applying it to everything. And so the big difference is that when you're going for insulin, it looks different than the road to insulin looks different than the road for blood sugar. The road for hormones in your diet and your life looks different than the road of calories. And so we have to be able to step back and go, okay, this is conflicting. How do we settle it out? So the overexposure of insulin shuts down the repair, keeps our system in that one state, starts to break down. Then the insulin is screaming at the body all the time to store, because insulin is a storage hormone. That's the easiest way to think of it. It's a storage hormone. And so when you eat, insulin goes up and says, store some energy. And if you're metabolically flexible, you're in shape, and you got good glycogen stores in your muscle, like an athlete does, that's where it goes. If you don't, then the only other options go to fat. And if it's coming in too fast, then it gets stuffed in the liver and the organs because it can't keep up with what's coming in, right? Mainly glucose, right? Mainly glucose. And the number one offender is fructose of all the sugars. And so that's what the process goes through. And so the athlete has a huge advantage potentially to avoid that because of their training capacity, right? Because of their training capacity. Because a competitive athlete can have up to 4,000% more glycogen storage than someone who's sedentary. Those of us that maybe used to compete, or we're pretty active, or we train, we're probably in the middle, but that's still a 2,000% difference.
Yeah, right? Big.
Yeah, that makes a difference. And so when you're insulin resistant, eventually that leads to prediabetes. All weight gain, all fat gain, body fat gain is an insulin factor, right? Insulin's the only thing that can make you gain body fat. And then, so obesity is tied in there, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, dementia, because Alzheimer's now, they're calling it type 3 diabetes because of the relationship. And so all chronic disease stems from that. And so it became a very clear place to start. And so that's what we do. We work to change the fundamental physiology. Sorry, you can hear that going background. I think way too fast. We want to change the physiology so that it responds differently, not just manage it. Because medicine's good at that. They can manage blood sugar with diet, with supplements, with medications, but it doesn't change the outcomes. They still get all the problems, but now they get it with normal blood sugar. Not a good idea. So we work to change that physiology. Therefore, you can change the outcomes. So
what are some? No, that's great. I mean, so let's kind of go into what are signs and symptoms of insulin resistance, and maybe who, like athletes can get it too. As I said, I became insulin resistant, not because of what I eat, because my busy lifestyle, living life as a race, as I wrote in my book, but also I have the genetic SNPs. Like if you look at the genetics, I did DNA Fit, and I've done like 3 different genetic tests, and I am carb sensitive, and I'm more prone to type 2 diabetes. So I have to be careful a little bit more with my carb intake, and that's going to be more individualized, but like looking at the different genetic SNPs. But insulin resistant signs and symptoms is kind of start there, and then what we can do about it. Because I don't think a lot of people get it tested. I might throw in there too, if we can dive into how to test it. Because I just went to my first doctor's appointment here where I moved to, and I was disgusted. It's like, you guys do nothing. They just test A1C. So if we can go into signs and symptoms, and then how to test if you have insulin resistance.
Well, some of the signs and symptoms are weight gain. That doesn't make sense. So, as adults, we go up and down in weight. We usually know why. But if something's not adding up, that's a good sign that that there's some resistance going on, because you will gain more weight when there's this insulin resistance, because you gain it easier because you're stuck in the fed state and your body's screaming store, store, store. Doesn't matter how much you eat or move, it'll still go there. And so that's one. If you ever gone up and down in weight significantly, like 20, 30 pounds in a year or 2 years, several times over your life, then there's definitely an insulin issue in there somewhere. Those are the more subtle signs. Things that come up with insulin resistance are when people eat and then they're hungry very short after they eat, or they start eating something, especially carb or junk, and they can't stop.
Yeah, that'd be me.
Well, how many people will say an open bag of chips is an empty bag of chips?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you don't get that full button, which relates probably leptin and ghrelin hormones as well, but just you don't feel satiated that you can just keep, you just have one, suddenly, like you said, the bag's empty.
Yeah, insulin is the bully on the playground. Insulin is the boss, because energy use is primal to every cell. Like that's like top tier, right? When insulin talks, everyone listens, and it's a bully. And so when insulin's jamming, then leptin goes off, and leptin, if it hits a certain threshold and goes too high, that's when they get leptin resistance and turns off all the good stuff. And the ghrelin, when it gets too high, it just makes us hungry. That's hungry and satiation. Now they're thrown off. And so insulin alone can do that, but also fructose can do that. Fructose alone will do both of those things. It will it'll block being full, and it'll make you more hungry instantly. And that's not a good combo when you don't get full and you want to eat more. And it's 2.5 times sweeter than fructose. Man, we got ourselves that's our first drug dealer right there, right? Is fructose. So, and we don't metabolize it well. Only organ that metabolizes is the liver. And there's no natural biochemical reactions that require fructose. And so the only real pathway it has is go right to the liver, and usually right to liver fat. And so, but that can happen from too much fructose, but the same thing happens with too much insulin exposure, right? And so the signs of that, sometimes when people get real tired right after they eat, that's a sign. If you're irritable, then you eat something and you feel better. You've seen the candy bar commercials where the guys, Joe Pesci's and he says, "Hey man, you're not yourself when you're hungry," and he bites and turns back into the nice kid.
Yeah.
Hangries, that is a pretty clear sign that either it's part and parcel with the addiction cycle, but you got some resistance going on there for sure. And then, like you said, testing, there's simple tests you can do on yourself. If you measure around your waist, right at your belly button, nice and flat, and in a women, if you're over 35 inches, that's a positive marker. In men, if you're over 40 inches, positive marker. And now if you want to see if you're going that way, for women, it's about 33.5. And for men, it's about 38. Because you want to identify before you're at that point, right? Because 80% of diabetes damage happens before your blood sugars, even in the pre-diabetic range. So it's going on well before we see it. So we want to be aware of that. So that's one thing, waist measurement. Another one is if you get those blood tests that you were talking about, just basics, you can look at that. You have triglycerides that are going over 100, you're got some resistance going on. If it's over 150, that's a positive marker for metabolic syndrome. So if your HDLs drop, your good cholesterol, if that starts to drop, then that's a positive marker too. And so there's a lot of different ways you can look at that. And if your vitamin D is low, especially people that live in the sun, or like in the Pacific Northwest we were talking about, who are taking supplements all day long, but their vitamin D is still low, that's a clear sign. That is inversely related with insulin resistance, because insulin will keep D down. If insulin's out there, insulin resistance out there, D cannot come up no matter how much you take or how much you bake.
Why is that? So it doesn't get into the cells if you're insulin resistant? Because
it's a counter-regulatory thing. There's certain hormones and certain processes in the body that are inversely related, like sympathetic and parasympathetic. They can't both be up, right? So that's insulin and vitamin D. And nowadays it's really important because vitamin D is like the bouncer at the club, letting people in and out of the cell, mainly in this one ACE2 receptor, which is what this big bad bug that's floating around our world attaches to.
Yeah.
Big deal. That's why obesity and metabolic issues are so much more likely to get that infection, because they don't have a bouncer at the door, because D is low because insulin is high, and they got an open door right there. And so it's a big deal. And it's a big deal. So that's one thing. I could just look at just the vitamin D level and pretty much tell with people right there. So those are some things. Then you can go into advanced testing. You could do a serum insulin. You can do a glucose tolerance test with insulin if you can find a place that'll do it. That's like the gold standard. That'll predict diabetes in the future, but it's very rare because it takes like a couple hours and you got to do multiple tests and so on. And so there's other tests you can do that will correlate very well, but those alone, those are clear indicators.
I think a lot of athletes probably not listening to this show because this is Low Carb Athlete Podcast unless you're starting to be curious about fat adapted athlete, that if you look at any race, I mean, that's kind of led me down here. It's like, how come I'm not losing weight when I'm having the recommended 300 calories every hour? And this was 15 years ago when I started, actually, almost 20 years ago when I started looking at, all right, I just ate a bagel and orange juice and banana, and then I'm supposed to eat every hour to bike ride when I started racing Ironmans 2001. That's like, okay, how am I supposed to burn fat when I keep having to eat this every hour? And I still to this day see people chugging down on a short workout, their goos and their Gatorade and all this sugar, that it's being fit and fat, and maybe fit and healthy on the outside, but they're not healthy on the inside. And that's what I've been trying to say. Are you fit and healthy from the inside out? Because I think so many athletes think they're working out, they're invincible. Nothing's going to happen to them. They're doing what they're run in the morning, then they eat whatever they want. They sit the rest of the day at a desk or whatever and go to bed late, that they don't take care of the whole person. So I think there's a lot of athletes that probably increase their I can't speak, the risk of getting insulin resistance.
Yeah, well, they do because we focus on the visual. I always said that skin cancer scare that I had was a blessing because I could see it. You could see it. That could have been happening in me. I wouldn't know for years, and who knows? That's what happens to most people. So it was kind of a blessing. But the fat that kills us is not. You can't see it. You can't see it. There's correlative signs, but you can't literally see it. You won't know because I practiced near the Hamptons for a while, and we had a lot of yoga moms and tennis dads, and they were in shape and they had the time and money to take care of themselves, and they did. But when you did tests, they had more metabolic syndrome than people who didn't have that luxury, that weren't doing that, but they were blind to it because they look good in the yoga pants and in the tennis shirt, but they were metabolically sick. 88% of Americans don't qualify as metabolically healthy. 88%. That's 88% are metabolically unhealthy. That means 12% are.
Yeah.
Right? That's a shocking number. And so the reality is you have to assume you are metabolically sick and act as if you're not, if you want to get out of it or prevent it. This is the only way, because our culture and society and the way we think. Look at the sports things you were talking about. That thinking is so prevalent and it's been shown to be so wrong, but we still do it. Same thing in medicine. They grab onto something, and even now that we know it's changed, they will not. They just won't. It's almost like a generation has to die off, and a new one has to show up in order for something to change. And so, like the whole idea, you're eating while you're running, okay, or you're biking. Well, we know that when you physically act, when you're exercising, you're in the sympathetic model of the nervous system, the mode, right? You can't have both. So it's natural. That's what we're supposed to be, and that's what keeps us going. When you're in the sympathetic, you're not in parasympathetic, which is where you digest food. So that's turned off. And so we're thinking, oh, this will give me energy. It doesn't work that way. It's not going into our body. It's not going into your blood. That's why a lot of distance and endurance athletes will actually soil themselves and have a lot of digestive distress because they're forcing that in. When
do you say soil themselves?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Anyone watching in that world, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know. It's just funny. Yeah, I think there's a lot of people out there that struggle and they just don't do anything about it, or just think it's their new normal, and they just say, okay, that's how my body works, and they don't take action. They don't take ownership. So what are some things, if people this is resonating with them, what can we do to have our insulin more in a healthy, happy level and really kind of optimize our health for longevity and performance and fat loss, of course?
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, because you cannot lose body fat if that's turned on. So there's a lot of things you can do. There's a lot, and it can be overwhelming when people. But like for the athlete, they got to kind of make a decision whether they want to be a sugar burner or a fat burner, because it'll take a while if they can ever get to the point where they can go back and forth easily, especially around competitions. Because if you're that strict and you got that goal, you got to choose a lane. and then be comfortable with the lane you're in. If you want to go fat, then you got to prepare ahead of time, just like a race, right? Or a competition or lift or whatever it is. You don't make a last minute change in that routine the week of the lift or the race. You don't do it. Or if you do, you know what happens. It's nightmare, right? And so you have to play. If you work to shift over there and you get into fat burning, you will see a whole different level of performance for yourself. We know that carb loading, for example, that whole, in high school, we used to go to the teen mom's house for spaghetti dinner, carb load. It was prevalent in everything. And we now know that that decreases endurance. It decreases power output. It decreases performance by up to 12% when you do that model. But we still do it. We still promote it because that's what we know and that's what people do. But when you switch out of that model, you have to stay in the other model, because you can always you can switch back to glucose or sugar burning anytime you want. It's very easy. The body will pick it up quick because it's more unstable, it's more toxic, it needs to get it out. It's a priority thing. It's not a preference. I don't think it prefers sugar burning, but it prioritizes it because it's more toxic and it causes more damage. Just like alcohol. If you could be a fat burner, sugar burner, doesn't matter. You drink alcohol, you're now an alcohol burner. Your body will stop everything and burn that alcohol off to get it out of your system. Same thing with fructose. So there's a priority thing going on with the body. And so, but if you want to burn fat, you have to kind of earn that spot and stay there, right? And so that takes some effort, takes some thing. But when you get there, all these things change. The endurance experience is completely different. There's some wonkiness getting there, like make a change, feel a change. But when you get there, like the wall, the classic wall, almost goes away. Hunger almost goes away, and goes away for a lot of people, almost to a point where we got to remind them, you need to eat, because you're not driven by it, because all those hormones start to balance out and they play nice. They get sensitive, very sensitive. We want them to be sensitive, right? Hormones whisper, they don't scream, right? They start to scream, well, you're in trouble, right? And so when you everything starts to change. Your repair cycles go faster and they're better. Your sleep gets better. And so when that happens, now the long-term benefit of what you're doing really can start to compound along the way. We see it especially in senior athletes, and in Central America, they call them the golden athletes, right? Because when we start to because they need that more than the younger ones in particular, because the younger ones are made of rubber. They can do whatever and usually get through. But you start to see that, and suddenly their old injuries, their performance all starts to shift, and it's pretty clear. And but you have to be committed to it, and you got to kind of pick your lane. That's the thing.
So to be fat burners as an athlete, we're exercising, and to do nutritional ketosis, a lot of people are saying, start with 50 grams total carbs a day. But what do you think if you're exercising once or twice a day and you're I think it always depends, because if that workout is like a lower heart rate maffetone type of fat burning heart rate range, or if you're tempo or interval training that you're burning a little more muscle glycogen, not all carbs are bad. And then we talk about carb timing to figure that out. So we're still fat adapted. And then we'll kind of get into that flexible day, that how do we keep that metabolic flexibility so we can burn both fuels?
We got to back that up a little bit. Yeah. Because first of all, the definition of being a carb is sugar. It's got to have sugar, right? So all carbs have sugar, but not all carbs are processed the same way. Your insulin is not determined by the glycemic index of your food. Your carb count does not determine your insulin level. This is very important and very misunderstood. Your 70% of your insulin response comes before any of that food is in your system. It's still in your belly, still being broken down. You're eating it because the body interprets food more than it senses what's in it. So the carb number can be very misleading. You can be very low carb and even eat keto-friendly things, and you raise your insulin. Insulin is what tells the body sugar or fat. It's the boss. If it's up, you're not burning fat. There's no way around it. You can't do it. And so you got to think a little bit more broadly than that. There's no carb requirement. Sugar is not needed in the environment. It's not essential in the body. Our body can make it at will from a lot of different places. It's not going to burn your muscle to make sugar. That's another thing that we got to get out of our head. For example, if you're working out and you make lactate, right, from workouts, lactate is one step away from being pyruvate, which goes right into the Krebs cycle. Doesn't even need sugar for that. Ketones can be made into glucose. There's triglycerides when we break them down, when we burn fat, there's a glycerol in there that gets made. There's so many things. So it's not going to come from the muscle. Don't worry about that. Unless that'd have to be a pathology state, right? And so, and you don't have, once you're metabolically flexible, you don't have to burn through your glycogen to start burning fat either. That's another thing we kind of misunderstood a long time ago and we stuck with. So the true flexibility is being able to go between sugar and fat burning, whether it's from your diet or from your body. And you don't have to exhaust your glycogen stores to get there. It's you're very readily using, and the body can go back and forth pretty quickly. But all that said, carbs, mainly processed carbs, have a hyperinsulin response compared to other foods. So when you talk about, doesn't mean you don't have to count carbs. You can, but you have to be aware of them. But mainly you have to be aware of two things. One is fructose, and one is any processed carb. And you can think of a processed carb, anything that is made from a powder, anything. And it doesn't matter if it's flour from wheat or flour from almonds or flour from coconut. It might be keto friendly. That flour, due to the particle size, will crank insulin. 30 grams of protein powder versus 30 grams of steak, chicken, fish, or you name it, completely different. 700% more insulin than even white sugar in the protein powder. So those protein shakes, they're killing people. They're holding you back, versus eating real food. So you have to look at that's what I'm saying. When you put the lenses on to see things through an insulin lens, it looks very different than glucose, right? And it tells a whole different story. And so it takes to take a step back and some education and learning, but once you get it, everything changes. And that's where the flexibility comes in, because once you know that, then you know how to handle your food. We can tell you how it works, and then you can choose what to eat based on your why, right? Because if you understand how, then you choose. I have people who are vegetarians. Now we have carnivore in my groups, right? And stuff like that. It doesn't matter. As long as you structure it the right way, you can do anything you want.
Now, how does gut health impact our fat burning, insulin resistance, metabolic health? What have you found with that?
Great questions, man. This is good. Gut health is really, really important, because the gut lining, the mucus lining, is on the outside of our bodies, one of our first layers of defense. And anything that affects that gut mucus layer, that protection level, shrinks it by anything. That's what allows for the junctions to open, the tight junctions to open, things to get through and have an issue. When it's thin, you have a hyper response to anything, whether it gets through or not. So there's a lot of things that will thin out that that mucus layer, and now your normal insulin response will be triple, no matter what you eat. That's a bummer, because you're counting carbs. Now you just got triple the response, even though you're at your carb number. Whoa, that's a big deal. And so that comes, that's where pesticides and stuff like that really affect the lining, because the chemical, the way they, in fact, and then artificial stabilizers like emulsifiers. Again, if you buy a store-bought cream, even a full-fat cream, if it's loaded with emulsifiers, it's going to thin that layer. You're going to get a higher insulin response than you would normally. That's a bummer, right? It's like thinking, okay, I'm only eating 20 carbs today, but because of these things, I'm getting an impact of 80. That's not fair, right? And that's what goes on. So, the gut lining is you want to keep that healthy and good. And the way to do that isn't necessarily eat a bunch of fiber and roughage. I'm not a fan of fiber. Fiber is an irritant. We do not digest it. That should be hint number one. And then it expands and it gets through our system faster. So they like that idea. But why does it get through our system faster? Well, you ever eat too much hot sauce? That gets through faster, right? That speeds things up. You ever get food poisoning? That comes out pretty fast, because when it's an irritant, the body gets rid of it faster. And so you got to be careful with that, because that can actually cause, over a long term, can actually cause problems. So bottom line is real food. Bottom line is real food. You stick with that. You stick to real food. You don't try to force in extra fiber, and you base everything around that. You really have a hard time going wrong on that. And so gut is big deal. Big deal. Absolutely.
Well, in nutritional therapy, as a practitioner, I did years ago, the NTP program, but we start north to south. So it's what we eat, as I always say, how we eat it, when we eat it, and why we're eating it. And I always love that, working with clients, because so many people, they might be eating that real food, but they're multitasking. They're in sympathetic fight or flight. They're not focusing on slowly eating, chewing their food, taking their time. And I always use example, like if you're in Rome or Tuscany sitting there eating a lunch, you're going to take your time, and why we don't do that when we're at our own home. But I think it's how we eat is so important, as well as getting the real food, because people don't digest it, and you are what you eat, but what you're able to digest and break down is so huge for most people, especially those people driven and ambitious. They're trying to do everything at once. They're overachievers.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And we emphasize, before we change what you eat, we change when you eat. Most people don't need to eat less. They need to eat less often. The average American, more than half of them, eat over a 15-hour window in the day. 15 hours is basically they're eating from morning to night. All their eating time comes down to hour and 6 minutes. So they spread that out with so many bites and things throughout the day. If you just take that 15 hours, and I don't care when the times are, just eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 3 meals a day, you'll watch your metabolism shift right there. Don't even change what yet. Just put all your food into 3 times a day, and stuff will start moving in the right direction. Once it's moving in the right direction, now we clean this up, we clean that up, we do some more stuff, we get into fasting, then you can really take off. But if you want proof in the pudding, just do that. And if you find yourself can't get from one meal to another without craziness, you got insulin resistance. That's a problem, and the carb addiction cycle kicking in. And you talk about the personality type. That's a problem too, because we get caught. This is part of an addiction cycle that is triggering, and it's worse with food than it is with drugs and alcohol. Because with drugs and alcohol, they hit the dopamine pleasure centers, and we like that. And we know a lot about that, but we don't. We're just starting to learn is that the serotonin, the feel good relaxation hormone that we love in the body, is stored in the pancreas with the insulin. Mm-hmm. So when we pump out insulin, it pumps out serotonin. That's why you can be totally hangry, take one bite, and within a few seconds you calm down. I always wondered, how can that happen? The bite is still going down. It's not in the stomach, it's not in the intestines, it's not in the blood, it's not going to my cells. Why is this happening? You got a double hit. You got the dopamine, ooh, that feels good, and you got the serotonin, that relaxes me. Man, that is a powerful. Mama rats, when they're tested, they will give up drugs and stuff for their babies. But if you offer a mama rat that's hooked on sugar, she'll abandon her babies. It's amazing. Think of how primal and how powerful that must be for an animal to give up their cubs or babies for something like that, when they won't do it for cocaine. They won't do it for heroin, but they'll do it for sugar.
Wow.
Whoa.
So let's kind of take that though in intermittent fasting, and apply that to the athlete, if you have any information on that. And then if you can tie anything to the female athlete that's pre and post-menopausal, if there's anything we need to look at, when should we fast and when should we not fast? Have you found any information in that area?
Absolutely. Big spectrum. When you're looking at fasting, all the different techniques, whether you're doing intermittent fasting, 1 meal a day, low carb window, or every other day dieting, or all the different, or even into what I call true fasting and then extended fasting, you have to place it into a plan. You can't, they're not one-off things. It's like saying, I'm going to go work out. What are you going to work out? I just say bench press. Okay, but what's your workout look like? No, bench press. That's one thing you can do in a workout, but it's not the workout, right? It's you got to put it in. Then that workout isn't standalone either. You put it in, you train. It's a training concept. It's cycles, right? Same thing. Fasting is a good tool, but it's got to be part of something bigger. Otherwise, you're not going to get a bunch out of it, and it's probably going to be miserable if you really be honest with it. And so all the stories about people not responding well, they just didn't prep, plan, and execute well. Just like if I decided to go run a race tomorrow, I might get through it, but man, I'm not going to do well, and I'm not going to be hurting, right? So that's not going to be a good experience. Same thing with fasting. And then when you talk about the athlete, I work with athletes, and I've done this with weight class athletes and endurance athletes, max lifter, powerlifting competitors. That was my background. And we go through fasting cycles in a certain way that it creates an anabolic rebound. This is what natural bodybuilders and natural lifters have been using for a long time, because they don't have the growth cycle that they can inject, right? So they use this. And what happens is you go through, you go into the fast the right way. You fast, usually we're talking 3 days to 5. And then you can use some support in there, like supplements and things, but you don't have to. And then you're still training. You train before, you train during, and then as soon as you come out, you refeed high quality the right way, and you continue to train. Your anabolic response pops. Guys will get veiny. Women will see some more definition, and your strength will go up. Because it's a rebound. You're rebounding from that thing. When you fast in the right condition and you refeed, you make new cells from stem cells, brand new cells. Like we're talking embryonic. I mean, people would pay a lot of money to inject these into themselves.
Yeah.
You can make them. But the thing is, they have to go to what you do going up to the fast. The body, and when you fast, will start to recycle and say, okay, we're recycling. We need more of these parts. We need more of these parts. And so then when you eat again, you get that food in there, you get that supply, and the body will put them where you need. You put the cells here in the brain. Oh, you got new brain cells. You can actually have new ones. Cool. Oh, the pancreas, that's how we get rid of diabetes. Oh, liver, that's how we get rid of metabolic. And you start doing these things. But then once they're there, if we just go back to old stuff and don't support these new workers, it's gonna be a hostile environment, and they're gonna leave. And that's what happens all the time. But if you do it right, it stays, and they reintegrate. And you just gave yourself a muscular, neurological, metabolic upgrade. You just upgraded your system, like you do your phone, and so it's pretty powerful, and you can see an immediate response within days of doing that.
That's a 3 to 5 day water fast you're talking about, or what?
Well, it depends on how they're entering. It can be water. It's best done if they're already off caffeine. Fasting is not the same when you're going through with caffeine. So, but if you are caffeinated, you can use black coffee, you can use teas and stuff like that. That won't interfere with the recycling process or the rebuild too much. It's a benign thing. But yeah, you have to be pretty clean going in. You have to be training at a certain level going in. And then you still train during the fast. I did a 30-day fast, and I was max lifting up to 12 days. And so some of my guys were doing 5 days. And in that time, no loss in strength, no loss in stamina, because you prepare right, you go through it right, and then when you come out of it, they popped. I didn't pop because I did 30 days and I overdid it, but I know they'll never do it again. But you learn, right? You learn. So so you do the 3 day. 3 days a minimum, because 3 day we know that when we refeed the right way in the right condition, we learned from the immune system, we'll rebuild all the cells of the immune system in a day. You just get a brand new immune system. Phenomenal. Harvard had a bunch of stuff on it. All these big names like jumped on it. And so we know that, and that's what made us look at these other things, is because of that hormonal sensitivity. The body's really sensitive. That's why when you come off a fast, you better be careful with spices and certain foods, because things that weren't pepper, all of a sudden it's like spicy because you're sensitive. I'm a chili head. I broke my 30-day fast with a chicken wing party. Good food choice, bad sauce choice. I hurt myself. It was not, that's when I learned really about that. So, you want that. You want to be sensitive. It's not always about the number. Like athletes like to check their numbers a lot, right? Especially testosterone in the guys and things like that. You want I don't care if the testosterone number is low, as long as the efficiency is really high. What I don't want, what was danger zone, is high testosterone, very low efficiency. That's burnout that's going on. And testosterone is influenced by human growth hormone. That's how it activates. Human growth hormones on one of those teeter-totters we talked about with insulin. Insulin's up, human growth hormone will come out and play, right? But you get insulin down, now you can get a 2,000% surge in growth hormone from your workouts, from fasting, from sauna work, from all sorts of stuff, right? In a fast, it can go up 300% just naturally within 36 hours.
In a 3 day fast, you think is
36 hours.
Yeah, 36. But if you do a 72 hours, is that for female athletes as well? I mean, a lot of us, like myself, if you do a Dutch hormone panel, my cortisol hormones are like at the very bottom. And is there differences?
Yeah, we don't get too caught up on that cortisol number, because that's a very bad test for how we use it.
Okay.
Cortisol is very sporadic. You have a big surge, it'll be out of your system within 45 minutes usually, or back to normal. So it's like, when do you catch it? And did what, especially when it's collected over a day, it's really hard. It wasn't meant to be tested and interpreted that way, but we do anyway, because we can, right? It's like the SNP test. We got a lot of information, we'll just, it looks like this, right? So, but for women, the women have to plan it around their own cycle. right? There's just some considerations in there. Women have to do more preparation going in, especially if they want to be fat adaptive because of the hormone response. Men are actually more hormonal than women, but women have more clear switches.
Yeah.
Men's testosterone cycle makes women's hormone system look normal. Men are a mess. So any guys out there, you would think your wife or your someone around you is hormonal, it's you. Guaranteed. I have a whole program on it. So trust me.
Oh, funny. So their testosterone levels change and the growth hormone, or what hormones are you speaking?
Testosterone. Males have 9 testosterone cycles. 9.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it goes from every 20 minutes to every day to monthly to time of year to, and then it can be influenced by food and by stimulus. I mean, it's stacked. And so the old saying is like, you don't like your husband's opinion or his answer, just wait 20 minutes and ask him again. It can change, right? It can change.
That's funny.
And ours is so sporadic that a woman's regular, normal 28-day give or take cycle to us looks strange, but it's because we're
every day throughout the day.
Oh, no, Todd, but women have to plan that because of the cycle and the hormones that go around with it. You just don't have to mess with it. That's why a lot of women, high level athletes, they have a lot of problems with the cycle going away or getting crazy, or when they stop training, suddenly it comes back stronger. And one of the biggest things they can do to stay out of that area is the birth control pill. Just stay away from it. It's big time trouble. Yeah. And they also lose more hair when they fast, and they think it's because of the fasting, but women have twice as many follicles as men. They have a lot more hair. Our hair is supposed to fall out on a regular basis anyway. Women know this more than men because they pay attention and they see it. But when you're not going through the repair phase of your body, when you're always in the fed state, you don't lose those hairs. They get more. And sometimes they think that's great. Look, it's getting thicker. I'm like, no, you got stuff that's staying around that shouldn't be there. So suddenly you put yourself into a strong repair stage and you start to recycle. Guess what? Body goes, hey, what are all these extra hairs for? Get rid of them. And so it looks like so much more coming out. And it's rarely like real alopecia, like problematic, but it can be impactful. And so, you want to have that mental space before you do it, because if not, people freak out. Sometimes it doesn't happen to everybody, but it definitely is something. So yeah, the cycle, you want to, if you don't want to fast right going into your menstrual cycle, you don't want to fast in the middle. You want, if you can time it pretty well, you definitely do it off cycle. As far as that goes, in the beginning of the cycle, women can either up protein and symptomatically up carbs, not physiologically, but that does help them get through on the other side when they up carbs. Then that's really the only time I think up carbing or carb loading is not even loading, but getting more is ever really a possible option.
So going back to the exercising and fasting. So what if you're doing like a run or going for a bike ride that's 2 hours long, besides lifting weights you talked about, but when do you think we should do it fasted, and when should we maybe have something before, or do we wait to eat after? What have you found?
There's a lot of misunderstanding with this. The food you eat is not what goes through your system to be used in the muscle when you exercise. You're using energy in your workouts from day ago, 2 days ago.
Yeah.
It's not today. It's a priority system. Like we talked about the glycogen. What comes into the glycogen is not what comes out. It comes out the other end, like corn, like those huge corn silos. You go get corn, it's not the stuff up here that you're getting, even though they're putting it in there. You got how long it took to get the bottom, same kind of concept. And so your body, when you're working out, uses glycogen because it turns off the digestion, right? That's how you can't use glycogen if you don't turn off digestion. It's one of those switches. And so you're using, and you have enough glycogen, even a sedentary person has enough glycogen for a whole day plus worth of energy. So you're not going to burn it even in a 4-hour workout. And here's the other thing. You don't burn more calories in a day because you work out. That's a big misnomer. Okay. Your body has a budget, like getting paid. If I give you $100 a day, that's your budget. You live on $100 a day, right? You might spend more at the farmer's market than you normally would, but then you spend less the rest of the day. So, because you only have $100. When you have your metabolic rate, you have your salary. You have X amount of, if we want to use, I don't like calories, but if you want to use calories, you have your calories. So if you work out, you use more in that time. But the flip side is your body gets more efficient the rest of the day and while you sleep. So it balances it out. You don't earn, like people think, oh, I did a good workout today, I deserve this
Yeah.
Treat? No, you just add it on, right? And then you just mess up hormones too. I think people should, when you do intensity and training, whether it's weights or high intensity interval type stuff, best time metabolically is in the morning before you've eaten, and then waiting as long as you can after you eat before you eat. The idea of a post workout meal, that's silly. That doesn't, you think, you have my shake and this and that because I just broke down my muscle and it's going to go there, it's going to start to repair. No, it's not. No, it's not. That's wishful thinking. We have more protein uptake after a workout, but it doesn't mean it's going to your muscle. Just like when you fast, you have more protein breakdown, but it's not coming out of your muscle. The first proteins that get broken down are scar tissue. Remember, the whole body's protein. So that can come from all scar tissue breaks up. That's why people have chronic conditions or post-surgery see a lot of benefit from it. That's why scar tissue in the brain breaks up and stops the progress for Alzheimer's. That's why type 3 diabetes they're called Alzheimer's. Plaquing, that's a form of scar tissue. That's what comes out of the liver and out of the pancreas to reverse diabetes. That comes out first because that's dangerous. This stuff we can pinch and we don't like to see in the mirror. It's not dangerous. Not, but we don't like it. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So working out is, wait. I always think just wait until you're hungry. That intuitive eating, like, well, I can't eat before I work out because I'll just throw it up. So I can take some aminos or some ketones.
Bad idea. Isolated amino acids, especially branched chain, are detrimental, big time. Huge, like insulin, like crazy, even though there's no carbs in them. Not a single one.
Even the tablets, like Ben Greenfield I work for, that we suggest to have the tablets, the capsules of the aminos, not essential, not branched chain amino acid, but all the aminos, and have that before workout if you need it or after.
You don't use it in the workout, you don't use it after, and it spikes insulin, which shuts off growth hormone, which is what you need to repair and get stronger. So it's not it doesn't make sense as far as that goes. And a post-workout meal doesn't make sense either. In the beginning, you can't listen to your body. Your body's kind of speaking Chinese and you only speak English. Everything's mixed up. People eat because they're thirsty. They eat because they're bored. They eat because of habit. They eat because of who knows what, because their body told them to. No, you got a lot of signals. We don't know how to interpret it. You wait a little while, you'll be able to interpret it. It'll be very clear when you're hungry, and you'll be able to eat to your satisfied point, not to being physically full. That is a bad thing too. Most people have to eat till they feel full, not until they sense satisfaction. Sensing is hormone, feeling is stretch. Big difference.
Right? Yeah, so true. Well, you know what? We're running out of time already. I knew we would, but we'll definitely have to have you back on this show. But any other things we want to finish up, like key takeaways athletes can take action on now to improve their metabolic health and their ability to burn fat? I
know that breaking a routine is scary as heck to any athlete. I know that. I've lived it. So don't break your eating routine. Break your eating frequency. Start with that. So you have your macros, you do your thing, keep doing it, just make it less often. So instead of 3 meals and 3 snacks, just 3 meals, go for 3 meals a day, same amount. So we're not touching your intake, right? Whatever you're doing, and do that and watch what happens. When you start to see the benefit in that, then you start going more, what I call in my company is insulin friendly. My company is insulin friendly living. It's all about being insulin friendly. You don't want to piss off insulin. She's she's the boss, right? So you start with that. Just start by eating less often, okay? And then you'll start to feel the change. You'll notice it. If you're training, you'll notice the change. You will. It won't take long. Watch your sleep. Watch your performance. It'll take less than a week, and you'll start to see a shift. All right, that'll give you motivation. Then you start to change what you eat, okay? And you start by, first thing to get rid of is anything fructose. Fructose is toxic, okay? It's just not good for us, especially if it's not from a fruit, right? So get rid of that, and then get rid of any of the hyperinsulin producers, which are anything made from a powder, protein powder, a flour, a mix. Get rid of it all. So you stick to whole foods. Okay, that's your next step. And each way, you'll see a change. You'll get better. If you're tracking time, if you're tracking intensity, if you're tracking power or lifting, you'll see a change. I guarantee. There's no way you can't, especially if you were not doing it that way before. Just start with that. And then as the ball gets rolling, then we can talk about the bigger things, because then you'll want it. Like, I like this. Let's get more. That's one thing the athletes do too. When it works, they want more, right?
Yeah. So are you kind of more like eat fat and protein, fill up in that, and then, get carbs or no carbs, or what's your?
Yeah, you don't need carbs, so you can eat them, but don't think of it basis I have to have them or they help me in any particular way. But what they can fill out a plate. I eat veggies for volume because otherwise it could be pretty dismal. Sometimes the meals look like but mostly it's fat and protein. I don't go too high on protein. I'm not a huge. I don't do 2 grams per pound or all that kind of stuff. That some people too much is just can be a problem too. So protein stimulates insulin and mTOR, and that's a whole other discussion. But too much protein can also be a problem, but it's hard to get to really too much. So if you're a man and you're between 70 and 150 grams a day, you're probably fine. You top out. Don't make it a percentage. Just make it set a fixed number. Women, maybe 30% less than that, but it's flexible. If you're more active, cool. You got some more flexibility. And then you fill up. Then the fat. The fat is because to be a fat burner, you got to take in fat and you got to burn fat. And there's a transition with that. So I was talking about, you got to pick a lane. But once you're there, it gets really efficient. Fat yields more energy, less debris, less stress on the body. It's a better source. It's the difference between burning wood, dry wood in a campfire with all the soot and smoke, or on a gas stove. You want the gas stove. That's fat. This is sugar. They both work. They both make heat and light, but this is more efficient. This is get more out of it, less damage, less pollution, the whole thing. So we want to be gas burners, fat burners.
Yeah, great summary. I think everyone has the intention to burn fat, but they don't realize that what you eat and when you eat and how you eat is so essential to really being a fat burner or a fat adapted athlete. And it's in phases. So just like switch like that, but just baby steps and getting those. But like Tom O'Brien says, base hits create a home run. And, just take your work in as an individual. I think everyone's a little bit different. And we have the one size fits all approach is just kind of a template and then make those adjustments per that person.
The one size fits all works. It does fit for all, but at different times and different people. So it's like, it's not linear. And, doing it a little bit at a time, being fat adaptive, it does take time. You got to get used to it, but the outcomes are very, very clear. The outcomes are very, very, the other thing that athletes, we need to stop thinking about is the idea of growth and repair. They're not together. They oppose each other, growth or repair. And what we think of as growth, strength, power, athletic performance, if that's really repair. That comes from repair, not from growth. Growth breaks us down. Repair builds us up. Remember that. So, growth at all cost, not a good idea. Not a good idea.
Well, that's eating the fed and fasted state. You're either or. So the benefits from each, like PK versus mTOR, it's that yin and yang of everything.
And then they're not 50-50 partners. They're both 100% important, but they're not 50-50 partners. You want a lot of repair and a little bit of growth, a little fed, a lot of repair. But what we live in, a lot of fed, hardly any growth, a lot of any repair. And so we've got it flipped upside down.
Yeah, love it. So where can people find you? We'll put everything in the show notes so people go down and read the rest of the information, the links in there, but just give them a little.
My website is insulinfriendlyliving.com. That's my brand. And then I have a Facebook group that I have huge archives in, hundreds of posts and videos and everything you can name. It's called Insulin Friendly Fasting Secrets. Insulin Friendly Fasting Secrets. And then my profile, I parallel with my profile, and that's where my following gets me. And so one of those places, you'll find me and I'll be there.
Great. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show. Definitely we'll need a follow-up because I'm sure people have questions and stuff that we didn't jump into because there's so much to dive into in this topic for the athlete and the female athlete. So I think it's great what you're doing, and keep it up, all your continuous education. It's always some live video on Facebook whenever I open it up on my computer. There's Dawn doing something. So keep up with that passion and finding your purpose to share that information. So
thank you so much. Thanks for having me. You've been great.
Okay.